Today, we're diving deep into one of the most common misconceptions of success, and that is that your success is determined by your background or the circumstances that have happened to you, your experiences that you've had in life. And let me tell you that this couldn't be further from the truth, because you have the ability inside of you to achieve greatness, and it isn't shaped by your hereditary background or your environment. It's determined by what you're thinking inside your head, and it's determined by the choices you make to use the power that you have within or to allow these outside circumstances to control you. You know, I know how this can happen because I remember my mom often talking, when we were kids. Grew up in a very middle income household, and probably early on, it was probably lower middle income. And I can remember my mom, if my brother or I were asking for something, that she would say, well, who do you think we are? We don't live over there on the other side of town. So our house was on this hill on one side, and then on the other side of town was a hill where a lot of wealthy people lived, people that were definitely in that upper income. And so she would compare us to that. And, where did she get that? Well, I'm sure she got that from her mother, because my grandmother was very much like that, always comparing herself to other people and what other people had. I look at my husband's mother. She was that way. Perhaps it was a generational thing. I don't know. But you can't compare yourself to what others have, because what others have does not control your life. You're in control of your life. And if you want to create a better life, you just have to look yourself in the mirror and determine that you're going to create the life that you want. So hereditary background, environmental background does not control you. Many people do believe that. And, in societies where they're very much a class society, that tends to control where people think they can go. And if you look back in history, at one time, that was very much part of our lives. How did we get that? Well, because that's what our ancestors knew. And, from there, that's why we have some of these generational thought patterns, because at one time that was the case. Wherever your parents were born in life, that's pretty much where you were. And like I said, in some cultures, that's still the case, but it doesn't need to be. And we have evolved out of that. So whether, that whole idea is coming from the generational thought or from, there's history or limited success ideas of the past, we are bound to repeat a lot of those patterns if we don't change our thinking. And it's up to us to determine what our thinking is and to decide that we're not going to let the hereditary or generational thought process to keep us from achieving the greatness that we so desire. So as Wallace D. Wattles says, no one is born without the ability to grow mentally. Well, what does that mean? You see, we have the ability, no matter what your IQ is, you can still grow based on where your IQ is. And it takes some ability and it takes some guidance, perhaps, to figure out where it is you need to grow. My whole adult life, I pretty much spent in personal development, and I love personal development, which is probably why I'm doing what I'm doing today. But I've always been so fascinated by how you can really change who you are and change your thinking by reading books, by going into deep thought. And, I was just reading a section yesterday, and it was talking about reading alone is not going to change a lot of your habitual thinking. You have to think about what you read. It's the thinking that you do that changes, not just the reading, because we can all read something and not get anything out of it. And that's why I often tell my clients, when I suggest that they look at something or study something, to really study it, not just read through it. And there are certain books I'll give them and I'll say, don't read this book, study this book. Don't go through it like you have to finish it within a week or 2 weeks. That's not the point. It's reading it and then provoking your mind to think. And that's what we have to do, because when we can develop our thinking, we can become somebody different than who we are today. Now, this doesn't mean that no matter what your circumstances are that you were born into, that you have to say that you have the power and perhaps even the obligation to learn more and to get yourself out of where you are, or where maybe you were, the circumstances you were born into. And you have the ability to do more, to be more, to have more. You have that. But you have to become aware of the power that you have inside of you, and the power that is in some of these books that I read and that I recommend to clients, and that I would certainly recommend to you also. But becoming aware that you have this power is the first step. Awareness is everything. It is absolutely everything. And the more aware you are, the more you allow your mind to gather in this information and start to think about it, not just read it, but think about it, the more you become aware. And you start to realize that we often tell ourselves stories, and these stories aren't necessarily true. And yet we allow those stories to continue in our minds. Yes, we've inherited certain traits. And as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We have inherited those traits, but we can overcome them with focused attention and being intentional about what we're doing, and with practice. So we don't have to stay where we are. So if you don't like the circumstances that you are in currently, you don't maybe like the circumstances that you grew up in, you have the ability within you to change. And that's what I want you to understand. That's what your inside power is all about. You have it inside of you to make the changes. Now, do you often need guidance? Yeah, probably. But you see, you can unleash the potential that you have inside of us, or inside of you. You have the ability to become who it is that you desire to be. Who do you really want to be? What do you want to be? What do you want to have? What do you want to do? You get the choice to decide. We have been given the highest intelligence available to any animal in the animal kingdom, and we've been given that ability to choose. And we need to choose wisely, because every choice we make has a consequence. Now, sometimes when we choose to step out and to do something different, sometimes, I'm not going to kid you, sometimes you might lose friends, you might lose relatives, because they don't want you to be different. They want to keep you stuck, just like your subconscious mind wants to keep you stuck. But you get to decide